Marzano Work Group presentation. Tonight's presentation will provide an overview of the district and building leader models. The presenters are members of the Marzano Work Group, which is comprised of district administrators and representative members of the United Teachers of Wichita, or UTW. The rollout of the Marzano model is a collaborative initiative and partnership between the district and UTW. This presentation is for the board's information only.
Good evening. I'm Shannon Crissell. Madam President, Superintendent Allison, I'd want to introduce the members of our work group, and we will have a presentation for you this evening. Several of our members cannot be present tonight. One of them is Gil Alvarez, and he has an opening video for all of you to introduce the presentation. But our members that are here tonight are Lola Pfeiffer, and she's one of our UTW members. This has been a very collaborative effort. Tanya Howard, and Tanya is also from secondary school. Charlotte Martinez is our elementary representative, and she was not able to be here tonight. Our administrative members are Mr. Alvarez, who you'll hear from momentarily, Tiffany Irving, who many of you know, and Michelle Ingenthron, principal at Colvin Elementary. So without further ado, I'm going to ask that we also recognize Andrew Davis, who's one of our evaluation liaisons, and Jennifer Ruckman Miller. She could not be here tonight. And then I have Stephen here because he's our security blanket in case we have technical problems. So, all right, we're ready for the video.
Good evening, Superintendent Allison, President Arnold, and members of the board. I apologize I can't be here this evening to go over our new Marzano teacher evaluation system. However, my colleagues here tonight are going to be talking about where we've started with this, with the change from Danielson to Marzano, as well as where we are now. I've been extremely excited to be part of this process. It's been about a year and a half to 2 years where we've begun the planning process, but we've had great collaboration amongst a lot of different departments within our district, including our union, the UTW, as well as human resources, as well as some teachers and even administrators. We've collaborated on exactly how we want to implement the Marzano system, and even going through the learning process from the learning map of Marzano through the actual professional learning opportunities that we've given for teachers to really understand the system, which they are going to present to you tonight. So tonight with our colleagues, I'm just excited for where we've gone and where we're going, and the true collaboration that we've had amongst everybody to make this a huge success. And not only a huge success, but really implementation and implementing this system with fidelity. We're going to see the difference between just teaching content to students and that paradigm shift now to where students are we're going to be concentrating on student learning. So not just the teaching, but the student learning. So here in just a little bit, the college will be going over a lot of the system from the very beginning. It's going to be a lot of information, but I just want everybody to know that it's been a great collaboration effort and a great success so far. I look forward to seeing where we go in the future. Thank you.
And I want to tell you that Human Resources, we are kind of like the moderators and the facilitators for this whole process. The folks that are here tonight do all the work. We do have our evaluation liaisons that actually put a lot of the materials together, and they put everything together, but the work group directs all of their work. And Mr. Mitchell and I, we are a good tag team because he's big and I'm persistent. So between the two of us, we make sure that it gets done. So without further ado, Lola.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Marzano Show. I see y'all got front row seats. We're going to talk a little bit about the past, which was Danielson, and the present, which is Marzano. Danielson was the evaluation system we were under previously. It was a bit subjective. An observer would come in and observe the teacher teaching and kind of base their rating off of what they thought. It was also only teacher focused, so it was only looking at what the teacher was doing and not at all what the students were doing. It was holistic scoring, which meant it was not really even an average. There wasn't really any numbers attached. And all of Danielson's research was qualitative, With Marzano, we have a much more objective approach that focuses both on what the teacher's doing and what the students are doing. We also have conjunctive scoring with this, which we're going to explain a little bit later, but it will shed so much light. And his research is quantitative, so there are numbers attached. The work group that Shannon just talked about is collaborative between UTW and the district members. We kind of establish the direction and critique and approve work that is going to go through. That goes to the evaluation liaisons, which are Andrew and Jennifer, and they kind of put together, they do research, they put together the PDs, they create, prepare, and support any staff development. Required staff development, the liaisons present the material to the teacher leaders, and then the teacher leaders or teacher trainers present to staff. They also present at the AP academies and principals at district council. And then optional staff development that's been available this year are HR workshops for principals, after district council meetings for principals, and buildings and departments as requested.
And I will just say that it actually has worked very well. This whole model, everybody in the work group has taken their role very, very seriously, and so we've really, I think, accomplished quite a bit.
Yes, this year has been phase one, classroom teachers and evaluators. The focus has been on the classroom. We've been looking at domain 1 all year long, teaching our teachers what that is, what that means. The training of evaluators and teacher trainers, the use of eye observation, which is our online tool, and also using the Marzano model for evaluations right now in the classroom.
Okay, if you on the screen there is the Marzano Map. It's the new evaluation tool that's used. To me, it's kind of the heart of the program, of the evaluation model. There's 4 levels of structure. This is showing you domain 1, number 2, 3, and 4 on the back. That's one level. And then we also have lesson segments on built throughout each level. Design questions and elements. This year we simply focused on domain 1 because it is by far the most extensive. I wouldn't say it was new learning for teachers, but it was a new way of thinking about the evaluation model, so it has been quite a bit of a shift. Okay, just thinking about domain only, that was the map you just saw, domain 1. There are 3 lesson segments on that side of the map or in that domain. The first one are routine events. That's procedures, behavioral management piece. Addressing content, that's the teaching, the instruction, strategies being used. And the enacted on the spot, that's showing that teachers have flexibility to make those changes when needed, when students are needing a differentiated approach for learning. Embedded throughout each domain are design questions. This domain has 9 of them, and that's what the teachers would use to guide their planning and their instruction. And then finally, there are 41 elements in domain 1. Those are the instructional strategies, what the teacher and student are going to be doing.
As she mentioned, this has been a paradigm shift for teachers. If you think back to when I was still in the classroom, I worked really hard to craft a great lesson plan, and then I presented that lesson plan, and that's kind of where it stopped, and I thought I did a great job. We still need teachers to craft those great lesson plans and take time doing that, but that's not the only factor any longer. It's also what the student output is from your teaching. So after I'm done with that lesson I've spent so much time working on and delivered so beautifully, what can my kids do with it? What is their output? And so that's one thing that we're starting to look at is the desired effect. What did we want the outcome to be for that student, and did the teacher monitor for that desired effect? And so you have just a generic rating scale, and this is one of the ways that we are monitoring for that desired effect, that student output. We want teachers to shoot for that applying mark, and there's that continuum there. Basically, when the observer comes in, they're looking to see if students have been monitored. So does the teacher understand if their lesson plan was effective, if their lesson was effective, and students are performing and gaining that knowledge that we want them to be at. If you're applying that, we're saying that over half, so the majority of your students are in that desired effect. A developing would be less than 50% of your students are showing that desired effect, and then innovating would be all of your students.
And one thing about this rating scale and this model, it's a growth model. And so part of what I think we've been really learning the last 2 years, we trained our principals 2 years ago. And this year we've been really training our teachers on it. So I think our principals are more comfortable because this is their second year. And of course next year it'll be teachers, it'll be their second year. But we've really tried to emphasize that this is a growth model. What we want to do is that everybody can have a bad day. But we're looking at evidence. We're looking at what do we see when we walk into that classroom. And if we don't see it, we have the tools now to have an honest and open conversation about, I needed to be seeing this, and I wasn't seeing the student evidence, okay? And so then you can coach and use this scale to coach people upward. And that's what we're really working on, getting people to provide some great coaching to their teachers so that we can improve.
One area in particular, professional learning, that has been provided this school year is defining what is rigor. And Marzano indicates there are actually two qualifiers to define rigor. One is the complexity of thinking related to that particular activity, and the other is student autonomy. When we're talking about complexity of thinking, we're wanting to think about how is the student being challenged to think more critically and be able to problem solve. With student autonomy refers to how are we helping the learner be a partner in their instruction and their learning? How are we releasing that gradual release of responsibility? That occurs when a teacher begins to move from lecture style to being more of a facilitator of learning and not solving all of the problems for a student, but equipping students with the skills that are needed in order for them to be able to think more critically. Both of these qualifiers should be in place in order to reach that rigor target that we're aiming for with our students. Additionally, we should also be looking at how are we scaffolding instruction so that we're meeting the individual needs of all of our students. So, in order to increase rigor, this is another tool that Marzano has provided us to help our teachers with lesson planning. We're wanting to begin to create lessons that emphasize students being taught in the levels of 3 and 4, that analysis and knowledge utilization. It's important that we're also providing foundational skills, but those are found primarily at level 1 and 2, where we're teaching students how to retrieve information, we're teaching students to comprehend. But we can't stop there. We must begin to challenge our students and provide them with the tools that they need in order to be able to think more critically at those top 2 levels. That's how we're going to reach that target of rigor to help our students become those critical thinkers and learners.
And the Marzano research shows that as you move up this taxonomy, as you move up the pyramid, that you start seeing the bounce and the lift in student achievement. Because if you look over here on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that the state assessment questions now are at that higher order of thinking.
So also according to Marzano's research, there are 7 elements that he indicates that we should use more frequently. These are also referred to as the Big 7. These 7 elements will help, if we help our students acquire the skills that are taught within these 7 elements, we also help them reach those more rigorous levels, as Shannon pointed out, the level 3 and level 4 at the top of that pyramid. So it's critical that we're using these elements, that we're planning for them and providing explicit instruction related to these in order to help our students be more successful.
And the 7 elements that are listed here, elements 6, 11, 12, 17, 18, 20, and 22, we have rolled out this year 2 teachers to introduce them to the model. So in other words, we didn't roll out all 41 elements. We could have, but we didn't. We're actually evaluating and observing them on all 41 elements, but really to help them understand the model, we focused on these 7 elements to really help them understand how this model works.
So this particular graphic shows over 2 million observation data points that were collected from 2011 through 14. The graph indicates that our public education has fallen short in being able to help our students move to those rigorous levels of critical thinking. And so what Marzano and Shannon have mentioned, those big 7 elements that we have provided explicit professional development to staffs this year. Again, if we are providing those type of experiences for our students in the classroom, that we're going to continue to get that lift to help our students become those critical thinkers and learners that are found within level 3 and 4.
And really what this chart shows is that we're not any different than any other district nationally. Most districts nationally are focused on the lower levels of instruction, and what we want to do is get below the green line where we can get to the higher levels of not only instruction, but the higher levels of thinking, the cognitive thinking.
So here is, again, an example of how the professional learning that has been provided throughout the year has been also to help staff recognize the connections to work that we currently have in place. Most of our staff are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy or the Costa levels of thinking from AVID. And so one thing that has occurred is that explicit connections of what we currently have in place within the district and how that connects and aligns with the resources that Marzano is providing us. And so again, ongoing professional development has been provided to the staffs across the district this year in making those connections, very explicit connections with our MTSS work, specifically with our protocols. Our protocols align very nicely with Marzano, meeting our instructional protocol as well as our behavior protocol. There are also very nice connections with all of our safe and civil work, as well as instructional techniques that we have been providing professional development around over the past several years, as well as implemented in our classrooms. And so when professional development related Marzano has been occurring, very purposefully showing this is how Marzano frames this, but this is how this connects to the work that we currently have in place within the district.
And I think that this was a very important step because as we were able to show all the connections, and of course, I'm sure you all remember that Charles Wakefield and I came about 2 years ago and did a presentation to all of you, about 3 years ago, and did a presentation to all of you, and we basically said this is why we want to switch from Danielson to Marzano. And one of the things was that this model was very well aligned with everything we were doing. In other words, it wasn't going to be a new flavor of the month. It wasn't going to be something else to give everybody. It was going to basically just be another support mechanism that aligned with everything we were doing. The other reason why we made the pivot from Danielson to Marzano, which you'll learn a little bit more about pretty soon, is that it aligns district leadership, building leadership, and teacher instruction all together, okay? And Danielson only had the teacher evaluation model. It was a standalone, only one thing. And so we were going to have to go out and buy McCrell or another thing for building and district leaders. This model, again, and as you'll see, is very well, has a great alignment. Now we're going to pivot to conjunctive scoring. And this was one of those big words that scared everybody when we first started looking at Marzano. We were like, conjunctive scoring, that sounds complicated, that sounds scary. And what in the heck is this? And so Lola, being the teacher that she is, has come up with a great way to explain what conjunctive scoring is. And I think this was one of the things that actually when our teachers who were on the selection committee heard about conjunctive scoring and how it works, they decided this is really a very fair a very fair way to score, because you can always have a bad day, and yet if you have a bad day or a bad observation or a bad walkthrough because you're just not feeling well, you're not up to par or whatever, it doesn't ruin your overall evaluation for the entire year. And I think that was a very good selling point. So, Lola?
Okay. This is actually my favorite part. I don't know if it's because I'm a math teacher, but conjunctive scoring. So the best way to really figure out what this is to do a hands-on activity. And I must give credit where credit is due. I was collaborating with some of my elementary peers, Amy Snodgrass and Amanda Sharshall, and they were talking about this hands-on, and I thought, oh my gosh, we can do that in high school. And so I stole it, with their permission, of course. Okay, so conjunctive scoring. We taught this as eggs in a basket. And, why is conjunctive scoring better than an average? Well, there's several reasons, but one of the main reasons is, we're not perfect, and every once in a while we're going to have maybe not a great day. Maybe our students, we didn't do a great job explaining, so they're not reaching the desired effect or what have you. But if you have an average, then one bad score, like your average is here, one low score is going to pull your average down. So with conjunctive scoring, you don't have that, which is awesome. So we look at it as eggs in a basket. So you all have manipulatives, so hands-on, and your beans each represent an egg. And I'll give you instructions here in a minute. All of these eggs are kept organized in our iObservation online tool. So as a teacher goes through the year, they're evaluated on elements. So they get rated on elements. And as they go throughout the year, they might have formal or informal observations or walkthroughs, but every time somebody comes in to observe, they are rated on anywhere from 1 to 11 elements, depending on how long the observer is there. So if we look at up on the screen here, we're going to look at a sample teacher. So when you are rated, you are given either a not using, a beginning, developing, applying, or innovating. So each basket represents each one of those ratings. So let's say that teacher C throughout the year got rated with 2 not using. So they were rated throughout the year on 50 elements, a total of 50 elements. So they have 50 eggs that need to be distributed amongst their basket. So with your beans that represent your eggs, put 2 eggs in the not using basket. Excellent. Let me monitor. Okay. Okay, so then the teacher got 4 beginnings, so place 4 beans in your beginning basket. And 8 eggs go into your developing basket. Do we need some intervention? And 29 eggs go, into your applying basket. Okay, and this teacher got 7 innovative ratings out of their 50, so 7 eggs in the innovating basket. It's wait time. All right, so if you look at your baskets, you can clearly see where the majority of this teacher's... I see that. Yes. Can I have a para go over there, please? Okay, so you can clearly see that this teacher, the majority of their ratings lie within the applying. And according to our MOU, for an experienced teacher to be rated effective, and let me clarify this, at the end of the year, okay, so these are the 5 ratings on your elements as you're being observed throughout the year. And at the end of the year, you get a final score in which you will either be rated as highly effective, effective, developing, or unsatisfactory. And then according to our MOU, we said for an experienced teacher to be rated effective, 65% or more of his or her scores must be at applying or above. So if you take the percentages, if you go back one slide, please. If you take the percentages, 29 out of 50 eggs were applying. That's 58% of the total eggs. And then 7 out of 50 were innovating. That's 14% of the total eggs. So if you add those together, 72% of this teacher's total eggs are applying or more. So therefore, this teacher would earn an effective teacher rating. So yes, see the manipulative. So that's why this is so much better than an average, because that teacher, they did get a couple not usings and some beginnings, and in an average, that's going to pull the average down. But with conjunctive scoring, it's so much clearer to see the total picture.
But yet at the same time, it allows that teacher to receive feedback that on that element, I should have been seeing this, this, and this, and I wasn't seeing it. So that's why I rated you as either not using or beginning. And it's really providing a tool, in my opinion, for allowing principals to have some very crucial conversations and to give some very honest feedback.
And what Shannon said, so when they get, after an observation is done, everything goes into iObservation, which is our online tool, and it immediately shoots feedback to that teacher. So the teacher can see the feedback immediately, which makes this a growth agent because they're able to read it. There's usually a reflective question. We're looking at how can we move from applying to innovating. We're always looking at how do we move to the next level, and that's what the feedback is for. And the iObservation just houses all this. So at any time, I can log in as a teacher and see where is my overall rating currently. And there's also on iObservation, there's videos you can view. There's all sorts of information within the iObservation.
Were you not going to have them put their materials away, Lola? Now I get to, please don't play with your things now while I... We just wanted to kind of give you an overview of this year, as you can see in your booklet and also on the screen. We started in August of this year during our report week. We spent a half day going over Domain 1. And then during the first quarter, we did just kind of that connecting and reinforcing that Tiffany talked to you about, letting teachers know that Marzano is nothing new, that we're already doing a lot of these things in our districts, and we have a lot of teachers that are very proficient at what we're already doing. So trying to take away some of that angst of this is not something new, we're just looking at it in a different light. Then we moved in to October, and we did the conjunctive scoring to try to explain to teachers what their ratings would be and what they were based off of, and also to start to expose them to the iObservation tool because they were beginning to get walkthroughs and observations depending on first year, second year teachers. So we wanted to make sure that everybody had that foundation. And then for our second, third, and fourth quarters, we've gone over those big 7 elements again that Tiffany talked to you about, breaking those down a little bit further and deeper and giving teachers more specifics and some one-pagers of examples of what those elements look like, sound like in their classroom, and also just some things that they could take back and apply right away. So our training schedule, now that we're done with Domain 1, we're moving into Domains 2 through 4 for next year. So to prepare for next year, during March and April, and in fact, just last week, I believe, our teacher leaders and our coaches were trained on those domains. Administrators will be trained in the upcoming week, and then our peer consultants in April. So we will have our folks that work a lot with that ready to go and trained, and then we will roll this out to teachers next year at in-services and through professional development. And then this is just, again, the learning map. Tanya showed you that front page of the learning map, which was Domain 1. This is that back side of that goes into Domains 2, 3, and 4. And again, that's just planning and prep, a piece that we're going to work on for next year. Also being reflective on your teaching and the collegiality and professionalism piece of of our profession.
So looking into the future, there's three other groups that are going to be trained. The first group is kind of the blue one up there, which is the school leadership model. And then we'll go into the district leadership, and finally the instructional support model. One reason that the union and district chose this was because it was a comprehensive, intensive, and intentional plan for the future. So this brings all, which Danielson really didn't offer, so this brings all of those pieces together, so it's very unified. And then, as was mentioned, phase 2, school and district leaders next year. We'll begin with the 2016-17 year, and then the instructional support group will be the year following that.
And then finally, I just wanted to show you the alignment. There are a couple of slides here. Toward the end, these are all the different pieces of the pieces and parts that go into the Marzano model. And then this is probably one of my favorite slides. This is one of the things that really sold me on the whole Marzano piece. There were two components that sold me. One was the alignment, that we were going to be able to hold district leaders, Mr. Allison and all of us that are district leaders, responsible for making sure that all these things are going to happen. Building leaders, which are building principals, making sure that they're going to be held accountable to make sure that this model is being followed with fidelity, and then of course teachers with the instructional pieces. And to me, that is one of the most powerful pieces about this model. The other piece that I really think is going to get us the eventual lift is this whole student monitoring students for understanding. What I saw when I first came into my job in July 1 of 2012, I looked through a lot of the Danielson evaluations. And the first year I was here, I went up to John and I said, John, we hired 42 brand new distinguished teachers. There's no way. I said, I know I've been doing a good job, but I know I didn't hire 42 distinguished first-year teachers, which told me that we needed a different model because we were going on our gut. We were going on the teacher at the front of the room is peppy, cheery. I like them. They're high energy, and all those things are important. But we weren't focused on, are the students learning? So now you have to have both components. You have to have good instruction, but the kids have to be getting it. And so that piece was missing, and now it's here. And if we do this right, we're going to see improvement in our test scores. I really, truly am a believer in it, and we're not going to rest until we get this done and get it done right. So without anything else, guys, you want to add? Again, I want to thank our work group. They've done a great job. They really, really work hard. And I want to thank Ben and Jennifer and Andrew for putting together the materials for tonight. And if you have questions, we're happy to answer those.
We're going to start off with Cheryl. I have a quick question. First of all buildings have been trained with this, correct?
Yes.
And currently, principals are using it and teachers?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question, I'm looking for. Put an X beside it, so give me just 1 second.
All classroom teachers, I should say.
Yeah, all classroom teachers.
Yeah, all classroom teachers.
I assume that includes our specials teachers.
Yes.
Okay. My other question is, what is our plan to catch up new hires?
Well, Mr. Mitchell and I are working on that. We actually are working with the new teacher induction group, and we are going to have, a streamlined introduction. We've got to get them up to speed. They won't have quite the intense training that we're not going to have 4 quarters of PD to roll out. It's going to be a consolidated, condensed, but Tiffany and her group are helping us do that. We know that's very, very important, and we've got to do it with new principals too. Remember,
Absolutely.
We have new principals coming on board. Mr. Mitchell's responsible for making sure that they get the training they need. And one of the things that the Marzano tool does provide for us for our new building leaders is they have an online course that they can take and actually take it over the summer and take the testing and get certified. Because one of the things that we've agreed to with the UTW is that every administrator has to recertify every 3 years. And I'm proud to say that every single one of our administrators did get certified.
Yay, that's great, because it's only as good as the people that are coming into the rooms.
That's right.
Does that include our assistant principals?
Yes, it does.
Great. This was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. It's obvious you put a lot of work into this, but I'm walking away from it understanding it, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Barb.
Thank you. I'm not walking away understanding it, so I have a few questions. I think you answered mine about professional development. I wrote that down immediately, and it's on the front end of the school year, basically. Is that the right conclusion?
During teacher report week, when they have the half days, yes, we are taking up one of those half days during teacher report week to roll these things out. Yes.
Okay, and I did the little game, whatever it was. Now, are the kids working in textbooks too, and they use that information similar to how we did the beginning and that kind of thing? I mean, I just wonder, are we using textbooks? That's my question.
Oh, sure. We're using textbooks. We're not telling teachers. Actually, Lola and Tanya, come on up. Really, I think what Lola and Tanya will tell you is that they're not changing their teaching, except that they're probably more aware of working toward that higher level of thinking, whereas it's really easy to get into the, let me lecture and let me, teach these kids so that they can comprehend what they're supposed to be learning. And now with this model, they know that they need to be moving up that pyramid. Go ahead.
I think what this model does is takes away, I taught it to you. Like we have to monitor the kids to make sure that they are getting what we're teaching. It's not that we're necessarily changing everything we've ever once did, but we're having to pay attention more to, are the strategies I'm using effective, and are the kids getting it? Am I making sure that every single kid in my classroom is understanding what's going on?
You just came up with something I was thinking. What about the poor student that is struggling?
Well, at that point, so if I'm monitoring, like Mr. Allison was struggling
he was
with
having a terrible
right.
time.
So I'm going to have to step aside and spend a little extra time and maybe look at it a different way. I might put him with a peer coach. I might put him with a para or someone to put a little more intervention time or intensive time until he understands, maybe approach it a different way.
That's also where the MTSS model would come in. The data would back up whether or not he struggles all the time or that manipulative just didn't work. So I wanted to say, just as a teacher in the classroom, this has been the most systematic training I've ever received, where every building on the same time is doing the same thing. It's being taught off a PowerPoint that's the exact same. And I think that's very nice to know. You don't hear people saying, well, I've never heard that. So it's everyone's getting the same training at all times.
And I know at our building, and I think at some of the other buildings, I'm a teacher trainer at our building for Marzano, so the teachers in our building are hearing it from a teacher. And then I also work with Lauren Scarborough at our building that does the same, which is excellent because, and Mrs. Doyle, she presents too, but all the PD on the Big 7 has been done by Lauren and I think it's been beneficial to come from a teacher.
I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
And one of the things that we've tried to do is we've tried to get feedback from teachers, because we know that we've put this together. We think it's a good program. But as we've gotten feedback from our teachers, we've said, you know what, that's great feedback. We're glad you're giving it to us. We're going to step back and reassess and evaluate. So one of the things that I will tell you that we had originally planned for year 2 was we were going to roll out goals and scales, because you can get a 34% lift in student achievement with goals and scales. And so we were like, oh my gosh, we need to do this. We need to do this. There's so much pressure on test scores. And our teachers really said, you know what, we really need more intense learning on rigor and how to create more rigorous lessons and more rigorous instructional strategies. We're not ready for goals and scales yet. And so we said, you know what, you're right. Because in order to do goals and scales, we need to do it correctly. So we slowed down 1 year, and we're not going to do goals and scales until year 3. So I appreciate the feedback and the honest dialogue we've been able to have, because just because I have a timeline doesn't mean it's the right timeline. Everybody once in a while has to go, whoa, Shannon, slow down.
Joy?
Well, thank you all. That was a great presentation, especially the hands-on. We don't get that a lot in here. It's good to be active when you're learning. It's good to have a tool like this, and I'm a big supporter of, we've talked about this tool for a long time, having a tool and having a way to help teachers know where they can get lift in their teaching and their educating. But I have a few concerns about this, because when I look at this first learning map that has 41 elements, and that in total there are 60 elements, and I'm thinking about if I were a teacher in a classroom and somebody said, when I come in to observe, there are 60 things you need to be doing, that would make me really nervous. In fact, just knowing there are 7 feels like a lot. So how do you handle that in all of this?
Lola?
That was...
That's a great question.
Yes, and that was how it was at the very beginning. Everyone was like, what? But this is the nice thing about Marzano. This is not a checklist, and we've had to preach this continually throughout. This is not a checklist. This is not a gotcha. This is a growth model. So when an observer comes in, I'm not actually an observer, so if anybody else wants to step in. When an observer comes in to observe, they are looking what is going on in the moment right then and there. And that is the element they choose to rate on. And maybe there's several things. So, depending on how long they're in your classroom, you could be rated on up to, 11 elements if you've got 11 things going on, but maybe you're only rated on 2 or 3. So like element 6 is identifying critical content. So if an observer walks in to observe me and I am identifying critical content at that moment, that's what they're going to rate me on. They're not looking for, I'm walking in looking for these elements. That's not how it works. It's what's going on right then when you go in.
The observer looks for, what am I seeing? What is happening right now in front of me? So for example, Joy, if you walked in at the very beginning of a class, you would see maybe the routine events, and those might be the things that you mark immediately, okay? Because you're seeing that the teachers reminding the kids of the classroom rules and the CHAMPS rules or whatever those case may be. And then as the teacher then transitions to a new thing, then new elements are going to pop up. But you're right, nobody is going to be judged on 41 elements.
And the big 7, those are the elements that we encourage to use more frequently. Those are the ones that give you the most bang for your buck. But no observer is coming in saying, I'm looking for the big 7. We're promoting that within professional development. These are the elements that are going to give you more rigor, and these are what you should look at and see, how can I implement. But it's not, if you're not doing them, you're not downgraded.
Okay, that's good to know, because as I was looking at this, I was thinking my employees are amazing, but if I had to grade them on 60 things, if they did well every day they were sitting in their office, that's overwhelming. So that's good to know. But let me ask a follow-up question. So if it is when the person walks in to observe, they look to see what's happening, and then they make those observations, and so that purple sheet you gave us would be on several different observations, several different of these elements. They got that, and then you did your score. But the question I have is, what if in the same educator's classroom, they were scored on the same element over and over and over again, so that you never really got an array of that there is a spectrum that's going on in that classroom? Is there some mechanism in there?
Well, we are watching that, aren't we, Stephen? In fact, Stephen runs weekly reports, and he sends them out to principals, and it tells them exactly which elements they're scoring, which ones they've scored the most, which ones they haven't scored at all. It tells them, it gives them a lot of good information. But for example, I'm watching it right now because we have deadlines coming up. We have some people who are a little bit behind. So I've had to pull in a few other administrators and say, we got to get some more walkthroughs and some more observations done because we're not going to hit our goals. So we've got a really good online tool now, and we've got good data to tell us what kind of elements are being scored. The other thing I think that it's good feedback for principals because they may need to come in at different times of the day. So if they're only scoring routine events, obviously they're just walking in at the very beginning of the class and then they're leaving and they're not seeing the content or they're not seeing the engagement pieces. So we kind of nudge them very gently and say, you might want to try going into the classroom at various times during the day.
Okay, so your office is sort of watching that to see if there are trends and helping the feedback to the observers. So I just have one other follow-up question, and that is, how long does an observation take? I mean, principals have to observe a lot of teachers, especially in some of the bigger schools. So how long does a observation take to go through?
Well,
then enter it in the computer and move on?
We actually have 4 components, 4 observations. You can have a walkthrough, which is 3 to 5. Actually, it has to be 3 minutes. Then you have an informal observation, which has to be at least 15 minutes. You have a targeted observation, and kind of speaks to what you talked about. If you're not seeing certain things, you will let the teacher know, this is what I'd like to see. It might be routines, it might be procedures that you want to see in place if the class is not organized very well, and you're coming in directly to look at those. And then we also have the formal observation, which has to be at least 30 minutes. Sorry.
And do they do these every year for every teacher, or how does that work?
At least 10 walkthroughs and 2 formal observations for our teachers that are 1st through 3rd year. And then we will roll out our fourth year and up next year. And it's a rotating basis where they'll be put in 3 different categories. So our category D, teachers 4 years plus, they'll be in 1 year. And then category D, the second component is in another year. So it's a lot for our administrators, and they're in a learning mode also. But we're all trying to take it very slow and get really good at it from a slow and steady pace.
We've done our probationary teachers and actually our year 4 teachers this year. And next year we'll add a 1/3 of our non-probationary teachers into that mix. So that's one reason why we spent the first year it was a practice year. What we told our teachers and our principals, this is a hold harmless year. We just want you to go out and practice and use this tool to get familiar with it. And then they did, and we went in and wiped out all the data. We said none of it counts. We told you it wasn't going to count, so we went in and wiped it all out. So this year does count. And so our probationary teachers and our 4th year teachers are being evaluated. And I will say that our principals have been very conscientious. It's a lot of work for them. It's a ton of work. And in our schools that don't have an AP, it's a challenge, especially if they've got a whole lot of new teachers. Because, we have got one elementary school that's got 18 new teachers. Well, that's a lot. So we're helping where we can.
Okay. Personally, I think it would be over time it would be nice to have some report back on the kinds of time it takes our district personnel to manage this, just so that it doesn't become overburdensome and get in the way of other tasks we've asked them to do. But thank you for your presentation tonight.
Cheryl? I just have one quick follow-up, and that's about the observations that are being done. Have we trained our coaches that go in with our new teachers, with the union, and are they trained in this so that they can do these observations and enter them as well?
Yes, our peer consultant group
Yes.
that works for Tiffany.
I'm sorry, I couldn't think of it, but yes.
They are. They are all trained, and they are trained as observers, so they are going in. And per our MOU with them, they do one of the formal observations on our new teachers, and the principal does the other one.
Yeah, and they can do those walkthroughs too as well, can't they? So
Yes.
that kind of eases the burden on principals when you have 18 new teachers in the building if you've got a peer consultant.
If you have a peer consultant, yes.
Yes, good, thank you.
And I
was going to add real quick, we've been past peer consultants, and that was something that we always wanted to see more of, principals in rooms. We know they're very, very busy, but that's one thing Marzano says. The time has to be made. And as a teacher, I see that in the building. They're doing their walkthroughs, they know how many they need to hit. So I think that's impressive that it has really pushed the leadership model as well as the teacher.
And one of the things, Joy, yes, we know it does take time, but that's one of the reasons why we ended up selecting Marzano, because of its online tool. It is easy to use. Principals can go in with their iPads. They can go check. What I think would have been helpful too, if we could have shown you a couple of screens where you can see what it is. They check the evidence. The evidence is listed there for them to check, and they're either seeing it or they're not seeing it. They're on the teacher evidence and the student evidence. So it's not like they're having to go in and write a long, dissertation about what they're seeing. They don't even have to take notes. They're just looking and they're checking.
And I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you. I think this is an excellent tool. It appears more objective. And when you think about a growth model, teachers have invested a lot in that career. And so to give them the immediate feedback, it's not a gotcha, it's we're in this together, we're growing, we're learning as we go along, and I think that probably is the most collaborative I have ever heard from an evaluation tool. So I thank all of you for your great work in that. Lynn, your name popped up and then disappeared.
I was just going to ask quick, what feedback does the teacher get, from those, walkthroughs and things? Can they see them, observe them quickly?
Mm-hmm.
As the administrator goes in and they're searching for that element that they're seeing, they're clicking their evidences, their student evidence and also teacher evidence, because we want to see both of those now. Mm-hmm. And we can click those, but that's not the only evidence you may see. So there's a comment box. You can leave comments. You can leave a reflective question. Sometimes I'll just even scribe what I'm seeing so that later on when we can go back and have a conversation together, it's fresh in our minds. This is exactly what I saw in this element. And I will say it seems like it takes a lot of time, but I will tell you that I've been able to have more focused, productive growth conversations with teachers than ever before. And I think the teachers at Colvin would say the same thing.
But the teachers can go in right after
they see it right away.
I
hit submit and they see the entire report.
Okay,
yep.
So good.
It's instantaneous feedback. You don't have to wait a week or two to get it.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on something Michelle was talking about, when the administrator or the observer sends that feedback immediately, one of the things I really appreciate about the Marzano eye observation tool is that it allows the opportunity for differentiated professional development for the teacher. So when I provide that feedback, Marzano has a library of resources that I can attach right there for videos for the teacher to look at, articles for the teacher to read, research that supports what we are talking about, and so it provides an opportunity for that teacher to have individualized professional development based upon the feedback that has been sent to them immediately.
Thank you.
John?
I just want to thank the work group for all your hard work and dedication and taking on what is really a significant task for our district. And to just go back and reiterate where they started this evening, this is a evaluation tool that's aligned to what we want to do in the classroom. It's aligned to our MTSS principles and quality instruction. And that's what makes the difference, is when we can have all of those things aligned. So what you're really measuring is what you want to see, and what our teachers have been trained, and having an evaluation system that puts in front of you and reminds you that these specific actions I take as a teacher and expectations I lay out for my students has a greater likelihood of positively impacting my students. And kind of that question, and Shane was talking about, not going in at the beginning of class. At the same thing, if I'm an observer and I'm going in and it doesn't matter when I go in and all I see is recall, at that very bottom of the taxonomy, I know that we've got some work to do. So I think this is as balanced an approach that fits well with what we're trying to do systemically, and really do appreciate the work that you all have put into making this successful as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.